What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. And today's video is about a breakdown of an interview with Mokaev that recently took place on the Mighty Cast. And I'm so glad Mighty Mouse did this interview. It's a really important interview because Mokaev is somebody that I've talked about before, and he's a really, really interesting case of just things that maybe can be improved in the UFC right now. And to me, he's really emblematic of what I don't want to see in this sport. In terms of, I want to see Mokaev back in the UFC. I don't mean he's the one that I don't want to see. What I don't want to see in the sport is the cutting of fighters who truly are potentially the best in a division. I mean, man, it's just such a bummer because if the UFC is meant to be the best of the best, which I think most people agree that it, for the most part, is, maybe with a handful of exceptions, we should always do our best to see the best fighters get in there. Now, if one of the greatest fighters has like a stumbling block, maybe they really have that talent, but they've had a bunch of losses and they get cut. That's another thing, right? That's performance based. But if people are being cut for these other external reasons when they truly have what it takes to get the belt, I want to see them in there and I want to see them competing. I almost feel like I'm being robbed or cheated as a fan of mixed martial arts if this is not the case. So that is one major thing that this highlights, that, oh man, maybe if this is happening to somebody like Muhammad Mokaev, you know, it pierces that veil of the UFC seemingly being a place where the best fight the best. That's one thing. The other thing that this interview sheds light on, which is, I think, a potential problem that I'm hoping only really exists for the most part in the flyweight division, but maybe not, maybe it exists elsewhere, is the UFC actually telling fighters to some extent how to fight? And we're this gets into some weird area because again, what is this meant to be? This is meant to be a competition to see who's the best of the best when it comes to fighting, hand-to-hand combat, where you can pretty much use a more or less unrestricted skill set to see who comes out on top. Now, if certain fighters have an advantage with a particular style, but the UFC or other people are telling you, hey, you need to modify it because it's not exciting enough, what's happening then? Now it's the UFC, not the coaching staff, not people that have your best interest at heart and are trying to optimize your performance. It's an external source saying you need to modify it to make it more exciting. And now we're not really seeing true competition. And for me, that's not what I want to see. There may be other fans out there, or more casual fans, that are just like, hey, I just want it to be exciting. I don't care if it's the best of the best. And maybe this is the way that the UFC is going, but I hope it's not. And I'd like to think, I'm hoping that this is far and few between where this is actually happening, far and few between cases, because and if it is happening to a larger extent, I will hope that that changes, because it's like, it almost then gets into territory just barely. I mean, not really, right? But just barely into WWE stuff, where now there's certain things being manipulated by the promotion, potentially to a small extent, very small extent, not saying it's anything like that. But it starts to get into that territory, because now there's a little bit of manipulation in terms of how you fight, which is going to impact the outcome. I'm not saying it's determining the outcome per se, but you see how it can get into that territory. Anyways, so these are the two big points that I want to outline in the introduction as we dive into these clips. But we're going to go through and we're going to hear Mokaev in his own words kind of tell the story of why he got cut, what exactly happened, and what his future goals are. And I think the takeaway as well, I hope the takeaway for you guys after hearing this video is, we need Muhammad Mokaev back in the UFC immediately, because to me, he is an exciting fighter regardless of how he fights. On top of that, he has been working on his striking. He just had a victory in karate combat, which is amazing. Major props to him. He's been going to Thailand, working on his Muay Thai. And I think somebody like this, young, hungry, bring him in there and let him go against Pantoja. I think that's lit, and I think he beats Pantoja. So most importantly, if I think, and most people think, he can beat Pantoja, we need him back in the UFC, because we want to see the best fight the best. That's my 2 cents. I am worried that it's not going to happen. I'm going to tell you why as we go through this video. But the first point that he makes in terms of why he was cut, when Mighty Mouse asked him, hey, why did you get cut? This is what he was told. This is the part that's troubling. Check this out.
First of all, like, I was fighting on the last fight deal contract against Manel, so it all depended on my performance. So they basically Mick Maynard is the matchmaker of UFC flyweight division, and basically the story is he asked Dana to keep the division, and he wanted more excited fighters, and excited fighters in front of for UFC. It's the strikers with the finishes, and for myself, I would go sometimes. I did the 7 fights within 2 years, and to make flyweight it is hard, so
Right.
within 2 years I had 7 fights against 4 of them was top 15 opponents, and basically the more I fought, the less performance I show, because um, the longer you're in training camp, you just get tired of it. You get tired of
Mhm.
it, and I start with great performance and start slowing down, and just didn't have that hunger. But I thought I just need to reach to the title, reach to the title. Everything was in my head, was just the Pantoja. That's it. I didn't care. I was just there, maybe win by decision. I didn't care, but only guy who was in my head, it was Pantoja. That's it. And basically, I was fighting against Mano on the last fight deal, and if I knock him out, they will definitely sign and give me like the best deal. But I didn't finish him, and basically they didn't resign me.
So if you guys remember, there was a lot of heat between the two. They had a major personal issues with each other, and people were very excited for that fight. I think part of the other problem that Muhammad Mokaev faced was there was so much anticipation. Man, these guys are going to put it all out there. But often what happens is when there's real heat and they really, really want to win because of that heat, both guys can play it a little cautiously. And that's kind of what happened in this fight. But again, Muhammad Mokaev won. He won that fight by decision, but still he won. And I guess because it wasn't exciting enough, or it was a bit of a letdown, and maybe the UFC was already upset with him in other ways, they cut him. So that's what happened. But again, going back to the problems that I see with what Muhammad Mokaev is saying for the UFC in general, is if you take him at his word, which I do, I believe what he's saying. I think what he's saying is the truth. He doesn't, again, this is just my character read, doesn't strike me as a guy who would be dishonest on this front. But like I said, that's just my read. But the problem is that the UFC, or Mick Maynard in particular, is telling him you need to make your fights more exciting. What does that translate to? As he mentioned, strikers are the ones that are more appealing. You need to get a more strike-heavy style. That's basically telling him to change something that's working really well, because this guy is undefeated in the UFC, and I'm not crazy about that. I just want to see the best fight the best. Obviously, I do like exciting fights, more action-based fights, as opposed to maybe, what I don't want to see is somebody just being held against the fence and the guy's just stalling out around because they know they're ahead or something like that, right? We don't want to see that. And I think I get that. That's understandable. So maybe there is some balance, but like for me to hear that perhaps the UFC is nudging fighters to go in suboptimal directions just to make it more exciting, it's like, I don't love that. And yeah, it's bothersome. But the silver lining is perhaps this is really only being told to the lighter weight classes, to flyweight, right? Or maybe even bantamweight. And it kind of makes a little bit more sense, as Muhammad Mokaev said here, right? Mick Maynard was put in charge of this division. He saved it. It was on the chopping block. They were going to eliminate it, probably because of the lack of finishes, but they're maintaining it. And so in this case, maybe they have to take some drastic measures to increase the excitement factor, whatever. And this is what happened. But the good news here for Mokaev fans is that he said part of the reason maybe why he was getting more decisions lately in the last several fights is because he was losing some of his hunger. He was doing so many fights back to back to back within a short period of time. I think he did like 7 in 2 years or something like that, right? That's part of the reason why his performances were the way they were. So hopefully now, if he comes back in, his eyes were set on Pantoja. Now, if he comes back in, we might see a new type of Mokaev. On top of that, he's been training in karate combat. He's been working on or he fought in karate combat, been training Muay Thai in Thailand. So maybe we are going to see a new style, and not just for the sake of appeasing the fans, but also a more optimal style. Now he's a more well-rounded fighter. I don't know. I think this could be really, really interesting. But again, this is what he said he was told. I believe him. Dana White at the presser, when they talked about Muhammad Mokaev not being re-signed, he was saying, no, it's because of all the problems Muhammad Mokaev was causing behind the scenes. I don't know. I'm more inclined to believe Muhammad Mokaev. And instead, what I think was the issue, that the reason why the UFC was mad at him and kind of threw him under the bus, I think part of it is that he's talking about this type of stuff. And I almost wish that if Muhammad Mokaev sees this video, man, I wish he would just stop talking about the fact that the UFC told him this or that behind the scenes, because I I think I would. I mean, I'm pretty sure they're not going to like it because of what it's the type of doubt that is creating in my mind or other fans' minds. Like, are you guys actually nudging fighters to fight a particular way? Meaning you're slightly modifying the outcome. It's not a good look. So my advice to Mokaev going forward is, I just wouldn't mention any of this stuff, especially since you're trying to get back into the UFC. And as a fan, we want to see you back in the UFC. So we hope that that's not jeopardized. All right. The next really important quote here is again from Mokaev saying what the UFC told him is that basically, again, to be more exciting, he needs to take more risks. Now, I want to color this comment because with a little bit of insight from what Justin has told me, because he actually feels like this a lot of times for other fight promotions as well. When you're in there, like he got really upset at another amateur fight. I won't name it or anything like that, but where there was a guy that was clearly winning the fight, but he was reluctant to go for the finish. Okay, because he just wanted to kind of wait out the clock and come to a nice smooth 30-27 decision. Justin does feel, and maybe other fighters themselves feel this way, that it is important to try and get that finish. Yes, for the entertainment factor, but also to put a stamp on that victory, to get more eyes on you. So like when you look at it that way, I don't have that much of a problem with the UFC saying something like this, because it's actually beneficial for your career, because all wins are not the same. Winning by a decision, you get the win, it goes on your record, whatever, but you win emphatically. Now the replay gets passed around. Now more people are talking about you. More people want to see you fight. And so there's that combination of the entertainment factor in line with the actual victory and the actual sport of it. So that, because there is that element. This is a direct, like, who you're going to fight and when you're going to fight is directly correlated with the revenue that you draw in as a fighter, as an attraction. So this part is, if people or the UFC or whatnot are just saying you need to take more risks to get like a more emphatic finish, put a stamp on it, that feels a little bit better to me than them saying you need to just go and change your style. But yeah, take more risks to get the finish. I get it. Anyways, here's Mokaev as he talks about this a little bit in more detail.
Told, to be honest, it might get me in trouble, but I've been told, listen, you need to put performance, like go out there and take the risks if you want a new contract. I've been told by that. It wasn't something that the trouble I did outside the hotel. It didn't help, but it wasn't the main reason. It was all about the performance, and I don't think it's fair, because we are mixed martial arts, and I was 23 years old when I was 7-0 UFC. And they have to understand that that I cannot be the best Mokaev, like flying knees and stuff every fight. Sometimes fight can be ugly. It depends on the opponents as well. It depends on opponents, and basically I feel that I'm gonna get caught.
So there it is. And that's the part he just explained perfectly, is if he's now putting pressure on himself to fight a particular way every time without any regards to the opponent or the matchup or the style differentials or whatnot, what are we seeing? Are we really seeing the best fight the best? Are we really, like, I don't want Muhammad Mokaev also to throw caution to the wind and start throwing flying knees and then lose when he could have won another way. That I feel robbed if that's what's happening. If he's being pushed in one direction that caused him to lose, then we're not really seeing the reality of the situation. As I mentioned many times, I think for fight fans, what we're seeking in these fights is the truth, is the ultimate truth of who comes out on top in this crazy, grueling battle of who can fight better, hand-to-hand combat, all inclusive, right? So anyways, that's where it gets a little bizarre. But going for a finish, right? There's also the positives of that, not specifically flying knees or whatnot, but going for a finish. I do also see benefits in that, because the judges' scorecards can be a bit wild sometimes. We've seen multiple times where people, one of the most recent examples is Cyril Gane against Volkov. Cyril Gane got that decision, but many people, pretty much everybody, felt that Volkov should have gotten the decision. That can happen when you go to a decision, when you go to the judges' scorecard. So trying to get a finish, try and take more risks in that way, whether it's submission or a knockout or something like that, I can see that as also serving the fight outcome and the fighter as well in that competition of who is better. So to me, that feels a little bit better to say it that way versus you need to like drastically change your style because more fans like strike. Like that I don't like. But hey, take more risks to get a finish or something like that. That's fair. But again, I'll reiterate, I hope, as a fan of Mokaev, I'm a huge fan of Muhammad Mokaev. I would love to see him come back and challenge Pantoja. That would be unbelievable. I think that would inject so much excitement into the flyweight division, especially because he's such a young guy. He's got so much potential. I would be more than thrilled to see that happen. So I kind of hope that he doesn't talk about this stuff anymore. I do think it can potentially get him in trouble. But what he said so far, let's just leave it alone. It is what it is. He's not saying anything novel. It's what he said before. But I hope the UFC and him can have a meeting of the minds. They can talk it over. Maybe be like, hey, man, I know we told you this. Just like, don't talk about it anymore. But yeah, we're going to bring you back. Let's do your thing. And let's have you be a good advocate and spokesperson for the UFC. I think everybody can win, even if they're a little annoyed with him right now for saying that type of stuff. Whoops, I think I skipped this. Okay, now this next clip I love because it's, again, DJ kind of talking about the same thing of he doesn't really think it's a great idea to change his style. And he makes some comparisons to other sports. Like, how wild would it be if people asked you to change your running style because it wasn't exciting in track and field? Like, that's bizarre. Obviously, it's not the same type of thing that we have in mixed martial arts, but he does throw that out there to sort of call into question this idea of a promotion telling you how to fight, right? But at the beginning of this, DJ actually talks about Muhammad Mokaev's style right now as it is, saying he likes it. And I agree. I actually like it too, because he's found a way to be dominant. He uses his grappling. He uses striking as well. I think we're going to see more of that if he does come back to the UFC now because of what he's been working on. But I like how he big ups him for the striking style, even though so many people have criticized it. So listen to what DJ has to say here.
For me, I like your style. It's different. You're mixing it up. You're playing. Everybody's playing checkers. You're playing chess, where it's like, I'm not. So I just
they can also blame the guys who've been in UFC for 10 years and ask them why you still not knock Mokaev out if he's got shitty striking, you know.
That's a great point. That's a great fucking point.
That's it. So if I go shit striking, pay them extra and say you're gonna go knock Mokaev out, we give you 10-fight deal contract with $10 million. That's it. Why blaming everything on me, you know? And
I fucking love that.
It's a good point too, right? He does get the blame, but I guess in those grappling exchanges, if he's engaging in those and kind of holding the person down and whatnot, right? Obviously that's how they're going to look at it. But you know what this makes me think of as I'm watching this is, like, you look back at, obviously, Colby Covington talks about how he had a similar experience in the welterweight division, that he was told that he wasn't exciting and they were going to cut him. And then he built on the whole persona. He didn't really change his style, but he added on the persona, and then people wanted to watch him and he was saved. Another thing that this makes me think of in another division is Aljamain Sterling and what he did against Sean O'Malley. Was that just him in the moment making a bad choice? Or was he also trying to be more exciting because he got to talk to about from the UFC, right? Like, I don't know how widespread this is occurring, these types of conversations in the UFC. Is it just in the flyweight division? Is it beyond? Anyways, I'm a huge fan of the UFC. I just hope, if it's happening, I hope it stops. Like, yeah, I want the sport to be exciting, but I also want it to be a free and true expression of fighting. And I want to see who is really the best of the best. And that's why I want Muhammad Mokaev back in there. So anyways, if they are doing this to some extent, I hope that, I don't know. I just don't want it to be a part of this sport and this company. That's my personal opinion. But anyways, now we go to this next clip right here. So right here, this is Muhammad Mokaev talking about what his goals are in the UFC. And I think this is important to take into consideration for other fans of the UFC or fans of Muhammad Mokaev. I think we really need him back in here because he's actually making a lot of money right now. But I personally love that, despite the fact that he's making good money in other promotions, that he still wants to come back to the UFC, because for him, it's an achievement thing. He wants the belt. And I think that's really cool, because I think when fighters view it that way, we see some of the best performances, and we see fighters really dialed into their training camps and doing what they can do. So the fact that he wants to come back and specifically get the belt for those accolades, I think is great, and just highlights why Mokaev belongs in the UFC.
You're making great money outside of the UFC, but you still want to get back in there. Is that just for your goal, just to be a world champion in the UFC? Or you're like, actually, the money's better inside the UFC?
The money, I think depends who wants what in the life. I want UFC belt, and that's the main thing. Like, money, I was getting paid in UFC, and I still it wasn't because of the flyweight division, getting different money to lightweights, and so because they're bigger stars, I would say there's levels to division. Maybe it's not fair, but it's better than the close division. They rather give at least money what they have rather than the close the division. No, so from the side, I understand them, but still, or I was fighting in UFC, I was still investing and did what I need to do in my life. So I wasn't complaining about that.
Another thing to point out here, right? So yes, he wants to come back for the belt, and I think that's great, and that will make him a great fighter and a great asset to the UFC. Another thing to look, I love the way that Mokaev is looking at the payments. He didn't go into detail about what he was getting paid, but I think it's so great that, and this is another reason that the UFC hopefully should value him when he comes back, because he is going to be a good team player and a good part of the team. Because right there, right, he could have complained, as sometimes I see fighters or other folks do, about payment and said, like, no, it's not fair that I get paid less. What, just because I'm lighter in a lighter weight class? Like, we should be all getting the same. He understands that the reason why the payment it might be different is because there's less demand for the flyweight division for whatever reason. This goes back to why Mick Maynard probably is trying to, especially with the flyweight division, make it more exciting, because that directly translates to more money coming in to see flyweight champs fight, which means more money for the flyweights as well. I mean, it's kind of like a win-win situation. As the division gets more exciting, it's better for the UFC and the individual fighters. But my point is that Mokaev is very logical, and he understands, like, yeah, we're getting less because probably we're less draws, which translates to less money. So it's just less money to go around. That's why our salaries are less. But that being said, I'd still rather do that, because what's the alternative? They shut down the division, right? That was what was about to happen. Make Maynard save the division. So again, I really like the fact that he's looking at it through this very clear lens, and I think that bodes well for him to come back to the UFC and be a fighter on the roster, because I think he's gonna be a good advocate for the brand. He's gonna be a great champion, and maybe going forward now they can have a talk with him and figure out what things make sense to talk about and what things make sense not to talk about for his benefit as well, right? Because once he's back on the team, they are all a team. All right, the last clip here is hopefully a good sign for Mokaev fans that hopefully he will be coming back to the UFC at some point. He said he wants to talk to the UFC. Now, I have no idea if the UFC is open to talking to him right now or yet or any point, or they put anything out there like you have to do X, Y, and Z before we'll have a conversation. But I hope this conversation happens in the near future and we do get to see Mokaev back, because once again, it will inject a ton of life and excitement into the flyweight division.
And I want to sit down with UFC and talk to them, because I want to see what's next in my career, and I believe there's a chance to me to come back and take the belt. And I believe only guy, I don't say I'm gonna run past the Pantoja. Pantoja is one of the toughest opponent, but I have trained with him, and I don't see anything special. Like,
there it is. And he himself, I've said this, but I'm vastly less educated on style matchups in with these two particular fighters than Mokaev. But I feel like Mokaev could come back and beat Pantoja, and he feels like he could come back. I think too, if you look at who Pantoja's fighting next, he's fighting Joshua Van, who's awesome, but I think there's going to be a mismatch when it goes to the ground in that fight. I think Pantoja's for sure going to win. I don't really know of any other really major threats to Pantoja in that division other than Mokaev. So, I mean, he wants to talk to the UFC. He wants to get back there. I guess he's trained with Pantoja. I didn't even know that, but that's got to just bolster his confidence, I think. I don't know. I think the writing's on the wall. I think this has to be done. This makes the absolute most sense. And this would be exciting for the flyweight division. And I think when it goes back to Mick Maynard wanting to keep this division around and wanting to bolster it, yes, I know Mokaev has maybe said things that the UFC didn't like, but I think at this point, it makes total sense to bring him back. Everybody's going to want to see him fight. It's a big story. So that's my 2 cents. Coming back to what I mentioned in the beginning, does this highlight something that could be a dangerous precedent in the UFC? For a fan like me who wants to see the best fight the best, yes. But hopefully this is just going to be something that's in the short term, maybe just to bolster up the flyweight division, and we'll see less and less of this kind of like indirect direction that the UFC is giving to fighters in terms of how they fight. And then the second thing that I wanted you guys to hopefully take away is, like me, we want to see Mokaev back in the UFC. Great fighter, amazing personality. I think he does the interviews really well. He's like, I don't know. He's awesome. He's funny. He's just he has that formula, which I've mentioned many times, is he can be himself. He's sincere. He's authentic. And I think that's like 80% of the battle. Not trying to be something else, not trying to be like Conor McGregor. You know, I mentioned this importance of sincerity. He is sincere. He's dominant. He's young. He's undefeated. He just fought in Karate Combat. He's doing all the right things, in my opinion. Let's get Mokaev back. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.